Hello, everybody, and welcome back to In the Box. I'm Chris Bradford, joined by Matt Sunday. Matthew, welcome again to In the Box.
Thanks, man. I'm in here for 5 in a game. Well, not the game, I guess. I would have been sent to the locker room, but how'd you end up in here?
I got sentenced here. That's what happened. I got sentenced to 5 to 7 minutes of solid Penguins talk of In the Box.
Man, you didn't even commit a crime. You just got sentenced in here?
No, I did not commit a crime, but I'm doing
the
the
jury
time.
Of the peers and everything?
Yes. So we're here today to talk about wrapping up our season-ending grades of the position by position on the 2017-18 Penguins. Bug just flew on me, but that's okay. So we had talked about the offense, we talked about defense, and now we're going to talk about, obviously, the goaltending. And obviously that was kind of a hot-button issue at the end of the season. A lot of fingers being pointed at the direction of Matt Murray. Of course, didn't have the postseason that the Penguins wanted. I don't know. What were your thoughts on Murray?
Tough year, not just on the ice, but the guy faced a lot of adversity in ways that I can't comprehend because I've never gone through something like losing my father, and I can't imagine, going through something like that in the middle of a season where you're put in such a position that you have to be out there and be your best at all times and be just so mentally available in the game of hockey as a goaltender. I just can't imagine, handling something like that. And the guy was still, reasonably good, but he wasn't Matt Murray that we saw for the last 2 seasons previously, huh?
No, I think that's the problem for Matt Murray. I mean, you mentioned his intellect and about the emotional part of the game, and he's really, when he's at his best, he makes it look easy, as they say, but he's really a cerebral player, and when something affects him mentally, I think that kind of translated into what you saw on the ice. And, obviously the numbers bear it out that he wasn't as good as he was in seasons past. And I think that's part of the other problem is he set the bar so high for himself.
Yeah, it sure did.
When you win 2 Stanley Cups your first 2 years, you're really only one way to go is down. And he sort of went down this year. But, again, I think he was not as good. But I think some people are taking that way too far to saying, like, he was terrible, where I think he was just maybe mediocre at best.
Yeah, I think that's my point is that it wasn't just, the losing of his father either. The guy, he gets hurt against the Flyers kind of early in the season.
Check in late November.
And then he sustains the concussion in practice, which, my God, talk about luck
Bad
there.
Luck, yeah. Holy Mata.
But it's, how do you go through those? Those were 3 separate events spaced really, into thirds of the season. And it's tough for a goalie to kind of maintain any type of momentum that you build up or really get on the right track at all when you're facing any one of those things, let alone the 3 that he did spaced out.
Yeah, I talked to him a little bit during the locker room clean out, and we were talking about, hey, when you had that concussion, it happened late February, he missed pretty much a month after that. Did he feel he ever got back on track from that? He kind of declined to answer, but I think the numbers bear out that when he was playing well in February before that concussion, courtesy of the Ole Mata slap shot in a practice of all places. But the Penguins were playing their best hockey of the year. He comes back, and then you could probably start to see how the Penguin season was going to end because when he didn't get really back on track, the Penguins themselves never really got back on track.
No, yeah, I mean that's exactly right, and the guys filling in for him, Tristan Jarry and Casey DeSmith, they both had really stretches of complete brilliance at times.
Yeah,
but they also aren't Stanley Cup winning Matt Murray, so it's tough to rely on either one of those for an extended period of time. So I mean, honestly, a lot of what happens in hockey relies on the guy that's in front of the net there, and it's just tough to maintain that momentum and continue the role that you're on if you can't trust constantly the guy that's back there every game.
Now, obviously, the backups were kind of an issue, but Murray, of course, this was his first season without Marc-Andre Fleury as his backup or, the 1-1A that the Penguins enjoyed. I think an argument could be made that not having Fleury there, rather, affected Murray because he didn't have the competition to push him to, bring out the best in him. Do you subscribe to that theory at all?
I don't necessarily, because I just honestly think that so many of the reasons that Matt Murray wasn't his elite caliber that he was for the 2 Stanley Cup runs falls back on what we've already talked about being, just the injuries and losing his dad. I mean, I don't want to place any blame on those things when it comes down to the playoffs because, it's a different season, but not having Marc-Andre Fleury definitely affected the Penguins because they just didn't have the other guy that they could rely on. And it wasn't Matt Murray who beat Columbus and Washington last season. now almost 2 seasons ago, but it was Marc-Andre Fleury. And now we see Marc-Andre Fleury matching up against that same Washington Capitals team. And, the Capitals got the better of Matt Murray this year.
Right.
But, would they have last year? We don't know, because the injury last season going into the playoffs, he didn't get to play them. But Marc-Andre Fleury was fantastic against the Capitals last season. And they didn't have that guy to fall back on. When you have Casey DeSmith as your number 2 guy in the playoffs and something goes wrong, what's the likelihood that Mike Sullivan's going to say, hey, you know what? We need to reset things, and let's throw Casey DeSmith in there for a game and see what happens.
Yeah, and again, not to pile on here because there's been so much piling on Matt Murray. There was no game in the playoffs other than Game 6 against Philadelphia where was it ever a consideration of even pulling Murray, because that was the game, of course, the Penguins rallied to win that game and the series. They beat the Flyers, go on to play Washington. So Murray obviously not his best, but certainly not as bad as I think some people are making him out to be. I mean, he's going to be the elite franchise goalie. How do you think he bounces back from this? He's mentioned this being a learning experience.
Well, I think he just has time away from the game, and that's something that he wasn't afforded after either one of his last championships. And, even talking about the time that he played for fake country North America, it's the guy really, he hasn't had any type of rest. And this season, the rest, there were emotional and physical tolls. So, I just think that being away from the game for a little bit, like I've mentioned before, the Penguins deserve a chance maybe to hit the golf course for a little bit after what they've gone through the last couple of seasons. Just take some time away from the game and just come back this fall and be ready to go and prove people wrong and show that you are the guy that won the 2 cups.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. And I guess the next question would be then, who is his backup next season? Because I think I was kind of in the camp that thought that Tristan Jarry was going to be the backup goalie this year, especially down the stretch, and it turns out it was Casey DeSmith. I think I like Tristan Jarry's potential. I think has a little more upside than Casey DeSmith, although I liked what I saw from DeSmith. I thought either guy could have been the backup guy, but that does create a position next year. Is it Casey DeSmith or is it Tristan Jarry?
I think that the main reason we saw Casey DeSmith down the stretch wasn't even necessarily that the staff likes him as the number 2 more than Tristan Jarry. And I almost get the feeling that it was more that Tristan Jarry could provide more for the Wilkes-Barre team, and he could get more to increase his ceiling even further by playing those everyday minutes and letting Casey DeSmith, who's a guy who's really built his career around being that number 2 guy, having him as the guy that can come off the bench, since he already proved that he was able to win some games for the Penguins. I just think that the decision was more to allow Tristan Jarry to continue to develop, because they know that he's the higher ceiling guy.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think they really like the Smiths, I'll say, maturity, and a little bit older, 3-4 years older, but I think they like the maturity in his game, especially as you mentioned in the backup role, where if he would be coming into a game cold like that, he'd be better suited to doing that than Tristan Jarry. Do you see Jim Rutherford possibly looking outside of those 2 guys, in particular Jarry and DeSmith, and maybe bringing in a veteran guy? Because when Murray went down in late November, I thought my first thought was they may have to go get a veteran backup guy now.
Well, I think that during that time, not knowing what the timeline was for Matt Murray's recovery, as with all concussions, you get that feeling where they might have to have a contingency plan here. But looking into next season, I like Tristan Jarry as the guy, because I think, again, that's the reason that he spent the extra time down playing more minutes this year and letting Casey DeSmith ride on the bench with the pro team, because they know that Tristan Jarry is capable of doing that. I just think that they wanted to let him develop more. So I see him in that role next year. I don't see the Penguins going after any type of goaltender security unless something occurs early in the season.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you. I think, Jarry is definitely the guy who's going to be the long-term backup to Matt Murray, and he got some valuable experience. Obviously, Wilkes-Barre didn't get as far along in the Calder Cup playoffs as they would have liked, but he did get some valuable experience down there, and he looks to be the number 2 guy next fall when the Penguins return for the 2018-19 season. Hard to believe.
Well,
time flies.
I think you're probably like what, a B plus, A minus guy as you are for all of your ratings over here.
Ah, boy, no, we're taking all three goalies into consideration here when we give the grades, and you're gonna bust my somethings about being a little too high a grader.
Bust your pucks.
Yeah, my pucks frozen. I think I would have to go overall B minus. Sound about right?
Man, Chris Benson on the other side of this. We had a conversation earlier today. I'm just like, man, Chris Bradford, he's just going to give them that A plus, A minus. I think overall I agree with you because the Penguins had two guys step into some situations where they weren't expecting to we leaned on,
no,
especially Casey DeSmith.
Anthony Niemi was the backup when the season started. So.
Right. And well, do we have to consider him then too?
Oh, well, they might be getting a C plus.
a C plus when you consider Niemi, but no, when we're talking about the three main goaltenders through the majority of the season, I think I agree with you, and it's really largely because Casey DeSmith was able to win some games, and Tristan Jarry, he actually stole a couple games early in his time up with the Penguins, and honestly, if it wasn't for a couple of mental lapses, we probably would have seen him stay as the number two for the majority of the season. But no, I like them in that B minus category, but I think that the combo of DeSmith and Jarry are bringing that up for me, because if we're looking at just Matt Murray, I'm looking in the C range, I believe.
You would go with C with Murray?
Yeah, I think so. And it's like I said, it's not all his fault, but those are the cards that are dealt.
That's why I get that reputation as being the easy grader, because I would have gone. I think I went with a B minus with Matt Murray as well, and I think the other guys kind of bringing me up into a solid B minus because. In January, when the Penguins really started their turnaround, it was Jarry and DeSmith really carrying the load for the Penguins during that time. So, yeah, I think B minus sounds about right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just honestly, when you look back at it, Casey DeSmith did more than you expected, which is above average, right? And Tristan Jarry, you could argue that he did more than expected as well, especially because he was able to steal a couple of those games, which the Penguins, Matt Murray didn't steal games down the stretch for the team. So having anybody do that in this past season, that's a bonus for me.
All right, well, that'll about wrap it up for this edition of In the Box. For Matt Sunday, I'm Chris Bradford. We'll talk to you next time.